There's a lot of talk about volunteering these days, volunteerism and civic duty and service to your community and country. And it reminded me of the time I learned the Arabic word for volunteer. I was a Peace Corps volunteer 30 years ago. 30 years ago today, I was a Peace Corps volunteer. And Peace Corps has excellent language training, but I will never forgive them for sending me out on my job in the Sultanate of Oman with sufficient Arabic, but they had not taught me the word in Arabic for volunteer. So there I was, working with a group of Omani workers on an archaeological site. I had a very unusual Peace Corps job. I was an archaeologist. And I said to one of them in Arabic, "What do you call someone who works but doesn't get paid?" And they answered very quickly. And I was a little surprised because I didn't know there was much of a culture of volunteerism. I wasn't even sure it was in the vocabulary there. And they answered very quickly. They said, someone who works and doesn't get paid, the word is majnoon. So I said, okay, majnoon. And I write it down in my handy little book. And for the rest of the afternoon, I was telling everybody on the archaeological site, Ana majnoon. I am majnoon. I am a majnoon. Ana majnoon. I am in Arabic is ana. And, for the next 3 or 4 hours, Ana Majnoon, Ana Majnoon. I told everybody. Later that night, by the light of a kerosene lantern in my tent, I pull out my handy Hans Wehr dictionary, and I'm looking up the word Majnoon. And in Arabic, you first have to find the root, and the root is jinn, J-N. And I look up, okay, jinn, demon. Majnoon, noun, to be possessed by demons, to be crazy, to be a lunatic. So I told everyone that I was a nut. Sometimes we think it is crazy to be a volunteer, and Jennifer would probably agree. I learned more than just Arabic, though, working in Oman and in the Middle East. I learned a lot about hospitality from the experts. But that's not where my training in hospitality started. I grew up in Montclair, New Jersey, a typical suburb outside of New York. Typical childhood, public schools, Boy Scout, played lacrosse. But I had parents who were really firm believers in some core principles. They believed in faith, had to go to church every Sunday. They also believed in work, so once I got a job that required me to work on Sundays, that trumped faith, and I got out of going to church. And they also believed in hospitality, very, very firm believers in hospitality. My father's father was Greek, and I'm sure it was in his blood, as it's in mine. We had to offer something to anyone who came over to our house. Didn't matter who it was. Lawyer, next-door neighbor, dog catcher, police officer, construction worker. They didn't even have to come to our house. They penetrated our yard, and we were obligated to offer them something to eat or drink. They took hospitality very seriously. And it prepared me for 25, 30 years of working in the Middle East, where hospitality is also taken very seriously. In fact, it's an obligation. And there's another phrase I learned in Arabic, la shukr ala wajib. And it's also an example of the economy of the Arabic language. La shukr ala wajib means thanks isn't necessary for that which is obligation. And I often say that to refugees at Iris in New Haven who thank me, and I say, la shukr ala wajib. This is my obligation. I learned a lot about hospitality in the Middle East from people who had very little. I worked with Save the Children for a while. I worked with Church World Service, with the American Friends Service Committee, a couple of U.S. government contracts, and spent a lot of time in refugee camps. visited people who had very little in terms of material things, lived in utter squalor. And it didn't matter how poor they were, how little they had. It didn't matter even what they felt about the United States government and what we had done to them, in some cases 2 weeks before I visited. They still treated me like an honored guest. Hospitality trumped politics in almost every case. And it was really remarkable. I would sometimes say on my journeys, from Pakistan to Somalia, Lebanon, Gaza Strip, southeastern Turkey, and I often said it, I have to admit, without really thinking it was going to happen. But I'd say, if you ever come to the United States, you got to look me up. I want to return the favor. And lo and behold, here I am, running a refugee resettlement agency. Our mission is to welcome refugees from around the world, people who've been persecuted horribly and have been invited by the U.S. government to come here and start a new life. But I can't do it alone, and Iris can't do it alone. We rely on amazing community groups like the Congregational Church of Brookfield. You guys really get it. You know, you feel, you really do feel that this is one of the best things we do as a country, as a community, as a congregation. It makes us more human to welcome the stranger. And when you stop and think about, well, what's it going to cost, Resettling refugees in a place like Connecticut's a little expensive, isn't it? You say to yourselves, we're going to turn that upside down. And we use the logic, well, Connecticut, with its amazing resources, should welcome even more refugees. We're not going to let the cost of things in Connecticut to be an obstacle. No, we're going to let Connecticut's wealth allow us to welcome as many refugees as we can. You probably have heard, maybe even among you, you've talked about, well, should we really be putting our resources into helping people from other countries when we've got people in our own country who are in need? And you've answered that question. You need to do both. You must do both. It's your obligation to do both. And in this age of globalization, Iraqis are our neighbors. We've got to help them, and we've got to help people down the street. And you've probably also debated, well, in this environment, in this climate of anti-immigrant feelings, maybe we should go about this not just in our usual humble and modest way, but maybe we should keep it quiet. Do it in a sort of low profile, under the radar. And you've said no. No, we are going to, poster's not up yet, we're going to celebrate this ministry. We are going to talk about it. We're going to encourage others to participate. We are proud of what we do in welcoming refugees. And if our political leaders had the courage of their convictions, they would also, with great pride, mention refugee resettlement as one of the best things this country does. It'd be there on the list with Peace Corps. It'd be there with AmeriCorps. There'd be refugee resettlement as well in the speeches written for our political leaders, and especially those running for president. I want to thank the craziest person of you all, which is Jennifer Wurst. I mean, she really is crazy. The time that she has put into this, but it's been a labor of love. Remember the words of Matthew. I was hungry, you fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I needed clothing, you clothed me. Those are the basic needs. And to tell you the truth, Iris, when we can't find a loving, caring, smart congregation like you, we take care of refugees in New Haven. on our own, and we provide those basic needs. But remember what else is said in Matthew. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. You have invited the Abton family in. You've literally invited them in. You've put them in your parish house. You've invited them into your community. You've invited them into your homes, into your lives, and into your hearts. And I thank you for that. And there isn't a better ministry. There isn't anything that makes us feel more human than welcoming the stranger. So thank you.